To go or not to go? These are the questions that we ask ourselves in our teaching career at some point or another. Today on the Teach Bigger podcast, we are answering just that question. Should I stay or should I go?
Welcome to the Teach Bigger podcast. I'm Chris Pratt.
I'm Chris Mosley.
And I'm Tyler Lamond. Pratt. So Pratt, the other day, you were an administrator, right? Or you at least played one on TV. Have you ever heard of something called Black Friday? And I don't mean the day that comes after Thanksgiving. It's apparently this day where all principals and administrators come together in all of their evil and decide who is going to get a contract or not. And I know that this isn't real. Like, I know that they don't have like these secret meetings and decide this stuff. Can you shed some light on that?
Well, I have to be careful. I don't know how they do it everywhere. I don't know how they do it anywhere. I've just heard that there's a little saying called Black Friday, and that it is that sometimes your principal will make sure that the Friday before spring break that they let you know if they're not planning to renew your contract or not. Now, I don't know that that's like a rule. I'm just saying that I think it's a professional courtesy.
So you're telling me that if my principal calls a meeting with me on that Friday, I should be a bit nervous.
Well, I think that in some circuits there are folks that do dread this day a little bit. But I will say this, that surely your administrator has let you know well in advance of the Friday before spring break that there are things they want you to improve on. Mm-hmm. So you should keep those in mind. But, that kind of brings us to today's topic, because we are nearing spring break, and that's not why we're having this conversation so that people get nervous. That is not it. And I'm sure that anyone that's listening to the Teach Bigger podcast more than this episode has nothing to fear, because you've been getting fantastic information for the past 4 seasons. And we've been helping you do good classroom management, the very best virtual lessons you can design. I mean, this thing is a treasure trove of brilliance. And so I'm not even talking to our audience, but we might have a first-time listener today. And if that's the case,
that'd be our first listener.
Right. So if that's the case, you have the rest of this week to listen to all of our episodes and get your life together.
Right.
But nevertheless, no, this isn't to make you nervous, but really this is the time of year where folks do start to consider where they are and where they want to be and their life goals. And so we thought it would be important today to really discuss this topic, because at some point in every educator's career, they're going to have that year, and some have it every year, where they think, should I stay or should I go? There's a lot of school districts. There's a lot of places that you can go, and there's a lot of places that, you can use your skills and your talents to help kids. And not all places are the same. And there are some very clear reasons that people latch a hold of certain districts and become very successful, or certain job situations. And so what we want to do today on the show is really discuss some of this. And, all 3 of us have had experience, some more than others, with making these hard decisions. And they are very challenging decisions, because it very rarely is it clear cut. There's always pros and cons, and you have to really weigh those things out. So what we want to do today is kind of, think about what are some reasons that I need to stay where I am. And for some people listening, you're like, I hadn't even considered leaving. Well, then you shouldn't consider leaving. I mean, if it's not even been a thought in your mind, then obviously you're content where you are.
Yeah. Mm-hmm.
But then there are some folks that, you've been really grappling with this for weeks or months or years, and you're trying to make some decisions. And so hopefully today we can give you some more, I don't even necessarily want to say objective, because at the end of the day, most of this is subjective, but maybe some clear thinking of how to flush through all your emotions, because this becomes very emotional decisions. And I think there's some things you need to do to wisely make a choice that's going to be best for you. So I want to start by saying this, that at the end of the day, I think that you have to, this is your career and it's your livelihood and it's what you're devoting your time and energy in. It's not just a job. Teaching is not just a job. It's way more than that because there's too much emotional involvement. Okay. I mean, it's a lot different than, there are a lot of jobs out there that don't have a lot of emotion tied to them, but teaching is not one of them. And so we have to be able to be in a place that is good emotionally for us. Okay. But that being said, it becomes a huge life decision and it can really change the trajectory of your life depending on where you are. And there are places that can really turn you into a better person. And then there are places that can actually hinder you and make you less of a good person. And so that's what we want to do is kind of help people navigate through those choices today.
Mm-hmm. I think this is important to say too, as as you're grappling with the decisions. This time of year, this whole year we've been tired, like 2020, like this time of year, everyone's really tired. And the kids are, more antsy and whatever. And then admin is stressed and then you have testing and then all that stuff like that. Spring break, the weather changes. Ice storm, you're out for a week. And so you really think, well, do I really want to be here? I think this episode will kind of give you some concrete things you can write down and like weigh out the pros and cons. After you kind of take a step back and say, yes, I am tired, but let me see if this school really is a fit for me. Not just an emotional decision, but a well like thought out, like, is this the right place for me? So
I will be very honest, and we've talked a little bit about this on some of our episodes, but I don't know that I've ever said it quite this much. I mean, I have changed jobs several times and I have left this profession more than once. So I know this experience very well. And you know what, looking back, I don't really regret any of those decisions because I had a clear head and clear reasons why I did it. I will say this, that although this is an emotional job, it is very dangerous to make an emotional decision. So, what I mean by that is, let's say you get a bad evaluation and that was just like one incident, everything's been great. And then suddenly, your administrator surprised you and they didn't like something you did. Well, that's not a reason to throw up your hands and say, well, I hate this place, I'm leaving. Because maybe this is an opportunity for you to grow professionally. So you can't make it an emotional decision. Maybe one parent jumps down your throat, or maybe one kid is really disrespectful and it hits you the wrong way. That doesn't necessarily mean it's just time to go, because there are things to be learned from that. But I think that what you'll see through today's program is there's a methodical way of thinking that you can really ensure that this is a decision you're making and not a response that you're having. So let's start. And I guess we'll preface it by saying, when we're talking about staying or going, it could mean a lot of things. One, it could mean staying or going from the profession. Like, should you be a teacher? Should you be an administrator? Should you be an educator? Because I think there are some folks that get into this and then they realize this isn't what I'm supposed to be doing. And I am the first person to say, if you do not feel like you should be giving your life to education, then don't. Because it is not good for you. It is not good for the kids. It's not good for the staff. And it makes it a bad situation for everybody. You need to be where you belong. And some people need to be teachers and some people don't. And it's okay, because sometimes you try it out and you realize this isn't what I thought it was. There's an old saying that those who can't teach. And I hate that saying because it implies that teachers couldn't get any other job. And I think that we as educators know there's nothing further from the truth of that. And I would say that really the only ones that can teach, because it's hard. And I mean, we have a profession that is demanding. It's every bit as demanding as, many of the high risk professions that we think of. But the difference is we don't have the money to show it. But hey, we can all hope. But that's not why we do it. So it may be a question of leaving the profession or not. Or it could be more of moving roles. Like maybe you're a teacher and you're thinking of moving to an administrator position. Or maybe you're an administrator and you're looking to be more of like in the superintendency, something like that. Or it could just be simply a lateral change. Maybe I'm a third grade teacher here, but I want to go over here to this school district or this other campus. And I'm going to be doing the same thing, but with new people and in a new atmosphere and a new environment. So all of these factors play in. And I think that the things we're going to share today will help you sort through all of those things. So let's kind of start by looking at some reasons that we would stay. And I will say that our list, there are way more reasons to stay than there are to go, in our opinion. So I want to kind of break down some of these reasons and share some of our personal experiences that we've seen the benefits of it. So the first thing, and I know it's something we speak about a lot, and Mosley, I'll definitely let you and Tyler speak to this as well, is I think one of the number one reasons to stay where you are, even if you've had a bad day, or even if you kind of have that itch, like I want to do something different, or I want to be somewhere new, because some people are just adventurous and that's what they do. But I would say this, if you are in a positive culture that you enjoy, I would encourage you to stay there, because not all cultures are the same. And I don't mean culture as far as like demographic. I mean culture as far as values and, the way that your district or your campus operates. And it is sometimes extremely difficult to find a culture that you can mesh with. So I'll open the floor there.
And I'm going to add to that too. Okay, so I think about like the first school that I worked at is when I worked with you, Pratt.
That was probably the best culture you've ever seen. Me and you.
Yeah. And then you left.
I left because it was a really bad culture.
It really did, right? Exactly. That's the thing got better. No, so and that school was a very difficult school to work at.
Yes, it was.
But I would have never left if it was up to me. And I was thinking why too. So the kids, they were not as,
And you say if it was up to you, and maybe some of our listeners are going, what do you mean? Did you get fired? So, I mean, I think maybe you should kind of explain why you left, because right now everybody's a little concerned.
I'm going to explain. So I punched a kid and that was it. No, I'm just kidding. No, I'll explain about that. But I was thinking why I wouldn't leave. It was one, I believed in like what the principal and what he was doing, and he fed into us, and he would motivate us, and like, at our meetings, and like speaking to us, and like we had a team dynamic as a staff too. Like the staff, we could call on each other if we had a bad day. It was a really like one of the determining factors is the people that I worked with, which plays into culture. Like a lot of praying and crying in offices and venting and like going out to eat and happy hours and like all of that.
There were relationships there.
Yeah, and hold each other up. So that's the big thing of relationships. And I was so comfortable. Like I'm still really close to the people I worked with my first year teaching, hence you, right? And even a lot of people, like it's several people. And it's those relationships that we built that kept us connected even when we had a bad day.
Yeah.
And when things didn't go our way, we can kind of go and talk to them. They would lift us up. We would lift them up. I think if you had that is something that would and you don't find that at every school, So if you have something like that, that is definitely a reason that might keep you there. And when I say, I would have left, like my first year or my second year teaching, is like in Texas, there were budget cuts and there were like tons and tons of layoffs. And I was in my second year in the district, even though I was the head director there, I didn't have tenure in the district. So I was like automatically riffed. And it was not a pleasant experience. I mean, I loved all the kids. I think they loved me. I mean, I felt like, I had some continuity there, and I loved the staff. I mean, I was like so broken, and it wasn't up to the principal. The principal liked me too. So he hired me. So that was involuntary. So I learned some things after when I had the decision to leave about how to make that decision on my own.
Yeah.
But anyway, the relationships is a huge part. You want to monitor that and see, like, how do I feel about the people I work with? That is a huge, because you don't get that everywhere.
Yeah, that's true. And I can speak on that because like, being a percussionist, I was able to be a contractor for a lot of schools, usually at the same exact time,
Mm-hmm.
and doing things. And I remember when I first got to Pratt School, and I was only hired on for 2 weeks, or maybe it was like a month. I can't remember. Basically, band camp, and I immediately saw like the culture that he was trying to build and the culture that you were trying to build, and that y'all were more involved with trying to just build people than you were anything else. And that was so different from any of the other schools that I'd ever worked at before. So I drove up there an hour out of my way from my
Mm-hmm.
university at least once, sometimes even twice a week,
Mm-hmm.
for free for an entire year. And it was solely based on the relationships and the culture. And I remember there was one day in particular that was really bad because I showed up. I think it was like a Monday or something. It was a teacher in service day, but nobody had told me. So I showed
Oops.
up
That must have
Sorry.
been
and
Pratt's fault. That had to
Right.
be Pratt's fault.
That was
and
my
I looked
fault.
around and I was like, man, there sure is a lot of not kids here. I wonder what's going on. So I get into the school and I go there and y'all are like working or whatever. And I was like, so what's going on? There's no rehearsal and a band practice. And Pratt's like, oh no, I guess I forgot to text you. Here's a cookie. Thanks for coming. And I was like, oh,
I'm sorry.
thanks.
I'm
At,
sorry.
at least I got a cookie.
Mm-hmm.
but but for real, like, it's one of those things that like the relationship and the culture really matters, because
Mm-hmm.
especially right toward the end of school, right when I was graduating, I was primarily working at two different schools, and one was Pratt School, and I think Mosley, you had already left, or maybe you were still there, and the other school was somewhere that was nearby. And every single day when I left, Pratt or Mosley or someone of the faculty told me, "Thank you for being here. We appreciate your help." They gave me a pat on the back or a handshake or high five, or they acknowledged me, and then they acknowledged the work that I had put in that day, and then told me like how well everything's going and thank you so much. The other school was not like that, not even in the slightest.
Mm.
And it was almost to the point where like, because it got to the point where like I was kind of like making fun of it in my head. I was like, oh, Pratt. And he's like, yo, you're a member of the community. We appreciate you. Like, whatever. I'm like, he says that every single day. But then I was going like right down the street to another school that wasn't giving me that and
Mm-hmm.
wasn't giving me the time of day. And I was just like this person who was kind of there. I didn't feel welcomed or anything like that. And when it came down to me choosing, because I was getting paid pretty well at that other place, I chose to go with Pratt because that was where the connections were. That's where the relationship was. That's where I was feeling valued.
That's good.
And I think feeling valued in your culture, in your relationship, and feeling like a part of the community, that is a huge point. That's a huge thing. And you don't realize how important a thank you is until you don't have it.
Mm.
And then you realize like, wow, that's not so dumb anymore. You
Mm-hmm.
know?
Yeah. Yeah. So, I mean, I would definitely encourage you, if you're in a place where you feel the culture is good, where it aligns with your values, where you're appreciated, where you have good relationships, whether it's through, the teachers or the administration or whatever the case, don't be quick to give that up.
Mm-hmm.
And don't let a bad day or even a bad week change that. Fix the problems and tackle them, because it's really hard to find a great culture. And if you've found one, you need to hold to it as tight as you can.
And if you're like trying, I guess if you're in limbo, like I haven't really paid attention. Like, what is my culture like? After you listen to this episode, I want you to monitor your encounters that you have with staff, with even the kids, and with like your admin, and see what type of encounters you have and how you feel after those, and that'll tell you.
Yeah.
If there's not an encounter, then that tells you what the culture is. If the encounter leaves you questioning, or if you feel very comfortable after the encounter, that should tell you too.
Yeah.
Mm-hmm.
All right. So Culture is definitely a big reason. Relationships, big reason to stay where you are. Okay.
Mm-hmm.
Another thing is, I think what we could refer to as continuity. Okay.
Mm-hmm.
I'm going to let Mosley really speak to that, because Mosley currently is in a situation where he is staying because of this very reason. So Mosley, go ahead.
Mm-hmm. So for whatever reason, I've, different opportunities. Like I feel like I've never had a chance to stay put
Mm-hmm.
at a place. Um, and it is something to be, said after like you get somewhere your first year, you spend the first year trying to get people to believe what you're saying, like to believe you and your vision, and that you have, you're knowledgeable about your content, you're a good person, and like, hey, I can help you, and I can affect change,
Mm-hmm.
right? So you have that whole year, you're building relationships and blah blah blah. And then, the second year, it's less of that, and you're able to do more as far as like what is the trust is there, and you're not questioned, and things are just even better, and things you put in place the first year, whether it be culture, content, especially what I teach, because it's a continuing thing. You start seeing the benefits, and that's something you don't see. And then the more that you're there, and the years start to cycle, you start to see that those foundations are, you keep building and building, and that's something that you can only have whenever you've stayed there a couple of years. And I had 2 years at a certain spot, 3 years at a certain spot, and I feel like I've never been able to really reap the benefits of the seeds that I plant. And so like last year, my first year at the school, and I like intentionally plant seeds, and like it like to this day, I go back and I see, what, whenever I did this with them last year, I can tell that has been put into place, because if not, they wouldn't be able to respond how they're doing, sound how they're doing, think how they're doing, and that happened when I did this last year on this day.
Yeah.
And that was, that's a whole year ago, but it's just all, the building. And I think the longer that you are at a place, if you keep doing those things, you'll be able to enjoy that even more,
Yeah.
And it's growing pains. Like you got to work through it, but after you're there a while, you don't have to, like
Yeah.
whenever I say something now, I mean, last year too, this school is great. Like no one questions. They know how I am. I don't have to, explain myself more than once. It's like, oh, we got it. It's
Yeah.
because, I've been there. You kind of earn the right too,
Yeah. And I mean, it doesn't matter how long you've been teaching. Every time you go someplace new, there is a part of what you do that you're starting over. And so, there is something to say, like, in other words, if you just got into a place for 1 year and you've had a rough year and you're building it and it hasn't been terrible, but you're just like, oh, I feel like I'm working too hard. Don't leave, because if you leave, you're going to start all over again. Next year will get easier. For first year teachers, I would really encourage you, if you can say like, I'm in a good spot, I'm in a good culture, it's just been a hard year, then don't leave that, because it's going to get easier. First year is tough no matter where you are, but if you go someplace else, you're really starting over again. You're starting another first year, and yeah, you've had some experiences, but you're starting in a fresh staff and a fresh campus with new kids, and it really takes you back to ground zero.
And then you'll be better the next year too, because you'll be more comfortable. And one thing with teachers too, like, we go, and especially if you move districts, you have to learn all the new systems and all the new, grading things and all the new acronyms and how you do things
The
on this campus.
acronyms.
And that takes, a whole year in itself to just be able to be
Right.
acclimated to that,
Yeah, I mean,
and get used to that. And you have to change. You got to change all that over again. It doesn't matter how long you've been teaching. It's different
yeah.
places.
And I mean, let's just say this like it is. Okay, moving and going to a different place, it can be a major challenge. And you have to realize the grass is not always greener on the other side. Now,
Sometimes there is no grass.
right. As Mosley found out 1 year. But I mean,
Ain't no grass.
And we're going to talk about it in a few minutes here. We're going to talk about, there are some reasons to go. But if you're just always looking for that better situation, you're probably never going to find it. And if you can be content and you can make things happen where you are, the longer you stay there, the better that gets and the easier that gets. So I think to go along with that, with what Mosley was saying about continuity, also is you need to consider where you, and if you're on a team, where you are, and have you finished the project? I think it's, there are some things that we do that are never ending, right? But there are some times where you're a part of a big project or a big team or a big initiative. And if you don't have a definitive reason that you need to leave, you need to stay and finish out your part of that project, because some people are counting on you to do that. And sometimes that makes it really tough. And so what I'm speaking to right now is some people just get that itch for something new, or maybe they're frustrated about a situation. And what I'm saying is you've got to consider the ramifications of that. And you need to make sure that if you're going to leave somewhere, that it is worth the consequences. So those are just some things to consider there.
I haven't experienced this yet, because every time I've gone somewhere, I was happy the next place,
Yeah.
But like, leaving somewhere and then you realizing, oh no, like you're there,
Yes.
and you're like, this is not what I thought.
I have experienced that twice.
Oh yeah,
And once was when I left.
I know when it
Mosley.
was. I
know. And
I was like, see, I told you, you shouldn't have left.
I know. But, I did leave, and I don't regret leaving there, because I think that it opened.
Really?
No, I don't, because it made some things happen in my life that were important. But it also wasn't as easy as I thought it was going to be. The grass was not greener, and it was painted to me as a much greener picture, and it was
No,
not.
I know. I told you. I was trying to tell you that, but you just
I
left.
know. So
You just ran away from your problems. It's fine.
Well, okay, I'll say about finishing the project. So I don't know, I haven't really talked about it much, but I know a lot of like Yamaha representatives and stuff like that when it comes to the music side of things, and I help them out a lot when it comes to conventions and things, whatever. Well, one night I found myself like having dinner with like the CEO of Yamaha Music USA.
And
And
for
I
those
was
of
like,
you who don't know, Yamaha is just one of the biggest countries. Sorry, might as well be one of the biggest corporations in the world. Like, not only do they sell musical instruments, which is a big market, they also sell like lawnmowers and four wheelers and jet skis and things like that. So,
Yeah.
So this is like, a pretty big deal. Go ahead, Tyler. I just want people
Yeah.
to know how important you are.
Little plug for
Right,
Yamaha.
Tyler's
Yeah.
important. Go ahead.
Yeah, I'm not sponsored, I swear. But anyway, so I find myself there, and an instrument had broken down in the booth, and I fixed it like super fast. And he was like really taken away by it. And we're at dinner and we're talking about it. And he's talking to me about being a instrument specialist. And it was going to require me to do a huge life change. I was going to go to Japan for a year and a half and like learn how to build and create all their instruments, not just drums, but like trumpets. And like I was going to do all this crazy stuff. And this was right at the start of my second year teaching. And I already signed my contract, and I knew that I would probably be able to get out of my contract. But I sat there and I really kind of thought, because he basically just said, fill out the application and like, I'll take care of it. And I sat there and I thought, I've started all of these projects at this school that I'm at. And like, I had done all of these things with these kids. I had basically pretty much been one of the sole hands that restructured the whole band program as a whole for the school and for the percussion section. And it was like in its infancy. And I knew that if I left, it was going to go bad. It was going to be bad. And it was probably going to be bad for the rest of its life. And because like no one, I mean, I'm sure somebody could have, but as far as I was thinking, like no one was going to want to come in and pick up the pieces if I would have left that. And so I decided to not do that and to stay and to finish the project, because from what I could gather from our conversation, luckily I don't think that offer had an expiration date. And I was like, okay, well, that's fine, because I feel like I need to be here for these kids and I need to at least finish what I started, so that way somebody else can come in and take it over, kind of deal. And when I ended up leaving and being a band director and going and doing something else, which was not the instrument repair thing, Japan thing or whatever, I felt like it was ready. It wasn't quote unquote perfect or done or whatever, but it was to the point that I could hand it over to somebody else and say, my part of my project is done, and then like somebody else can take it over. Like I felt like I had finished at least my project.
Mm-hmm.
Yeah. And I was really appreciative of that because that was right in the middle of what we were doing. And I didn't tell you, I didn't say anything. I was just going to let you make the decision. But I was so glad you decided to stay for my
Yeah.
own selfish benefits. But so I think a last thing to consider, a reason to stay, and it kind of goes with culture, but it's a little different, is that whenever you realize that you have an aligned vision between you and your administration,
Mm-hmm.
just as important as culture, that is really challenging to find sometimes, is when what you value about education and your goals as far as education and the program that you're a part of, and what the expectations of the kids are, and what the greater vision for the campus and the district, when when the district and the campus's vision and goals resonate with you as an educator, that's something you've got to cling to, because everywhere you go, the vision and goals are different. And
Mm-hmm.
sometimes it's really difficult to find that place that fits you.
Yeah. That okay, that's true. When I was in college, I was constantly I think I was asked like 4 or 5 times to write my philosophy of education. And at the
Mm.
time, I thought it was really dumb because like I knew what my philosophy was, and they're like every place you interview, they're going to they're going to ask for your philosophy of education, and you need to present them this paper. Well, no one has ever asked me my philosophy of education.
Yeah.
But I am glad that I wrote it out because it helped me put all of my thoughts on paper, helped me organize all my thoughts, it helped me figure everything out that you know what I mean, like just figured out where I stood on certain things. So
Mm-hmm.
that way when someone came to me and tried to have an educational conversation or conversation about education, I knew where I stood and I knew what to say.
Mm-hmm. I, as far as like the school that I'm at right now, I feel like this is why I'm so happy here, because of, and it's not only just the principal; it's like the entire admin team. You know, is that I value people, and it's very clear that the admin team, that's what they value first. You know, especially like in COVID times,
Mm-hmm.
like
Mhm.
we talked about this. We said, right now this is gonna show who really knows what they're doing. And like
Mm-hmm.
because there was no game plan, there was no rule book for this, and so that's like when I said this is I would not want to be a principal right now because I know they were given a whole bunch of like this is going to be a campus decision on this and da 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 da,
Mm-hmm.
you know, and my our meeting and stuff like that, and our principal was saying, you know what, I don't have all the answers, but we're going to do this together and da 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 da. And she here to support, and she was trying to make sure that we were okay and stuff like that, so we can make sure the kids are okay, and then we get the information to them. And I've
Mhm.
been at a campus where uh, it wasn't about the people, but about like money,
Yeah.
and about like data,
Mm-hmm.
and from district to district that was different. And I would also have to say that whenever you feel that the work that you do, whatever content, is valued, okay,
Yeah.
and we know every principal has their different interests and stuff like that, but whenever you feel like someone has taken an interest and show appreciation, like Tyler was saying, for what you're doing, because we all work super hard,
Yeah.
Mhm.
and in our field, a lot of times we're the last people there, and
Mm-hmm.
we're the first people there also.
Yeah.
I have the key to the building.
Right.
And whenever they just show some type of appreciation, and like hey, I'm not a band person, but I come here and I appreciate what you're doing. Thank you for what you're doing, and showing up and stuff. That shows, because I've been to a campus where my principal never, not one time in 3 years, ever stepped foot in my band hall to see what I could do.
Wow.
Mhm.
Yeah, so it is in there on the in there just having a party or nothing. It never stepped foot in there, and that's when I realized that I couldn't stay there, because it doesn't matter. It doesn't value what I do, so it doesn't matter how hard I work, because it's like trying to grow a flower under a rock with no water and sunlight.
Right.
Yeah.
So that's a huge thing to kind of make that decision.
Yeah.
So
Yes, never underestimate a like a common courtesy, like you're walking in the hallway and you see someone talking or something like that, and you just kind of pat them on the back, or
mhm.
like you have your hand out for a high five. Like I know that can seem cringy, I know that can seem maybe socially awkward or whatever, but it's not, and you don't know how far that will go. Or even like a really kind of funny way of saying that you appreciate them. One of my jokes I like to tell the librarian, because she helps me out with a lot of things, is I'm like, oh, you know what? I'm proud of you. Everything your mom said about you when you were growing up is true. You're talented. You're special. You can do anything you put your mind to, whatever. And she just kind of laughs because her mom actually works as a science teacher, like down the hallway, and so, but like it's ridiculous, it's over the top, whatever, but it clearly like makes her feel good. You know what I'm saying?
Uh-huh.
Right.
Don't underestimate that. A handshake, a head nod, a pat on the back, anything that's in passing that seems like superficial or that's dumb or like whatever, I'm busy. Well, no, you're not. You can pat somebody on the back as you walk down the hallway.
It means a
Like
lot.
And
it,
look,
it does.
I'm telling you, there are people right now listening and they're thinking to themselves, you mean there are places like that? Because this is not easy to find. Like a lot of times everybody paints the educational climate as all just, handshakes, high fives, and hugs, and that is not the case. It is often a
Mhm.
hostile environment. And so that's why we're saying if you are
Mhm.
in one of those positions where it's very positive and it's a good culture and you're in an aligned vision, then don't lose it. Don't lose it if you can, So, just to kind of recap, consider the culture, and if it's good, if the relationships are good, if there's continuity, and maybe it's not all these things, but maybe one of these things is strong enough that you need to stay there because all of them are worthy of cultivating, and
Mhm.
no institution, no campus is going to have all these things perfect. Okay. That's not it. And if you're looking and you're making a checklist and saying, well, that's not perfect, that's not the point. The point is one of these a really strong pull for you? And do you appreciate that and value that? Because realize that where you go next, they're going to sell you that. No one's ever going to say, we really want you on our team. Now, look, we have a really bad culture here, but we would like you to come and
Right.
join us. They're not going to do that. Everybody paints their campus as a great place to be. So whenever
Mhm.
you go to that interview, just like you're trying to put on a show, so are they, you
Mhm.
know? And so you really need to consider the reality of where you are. So, as we said, these are some very clear reasons that you should consider staying where you are. And just make sure that if you are considering to stay or go, that it is for a strong reason that you make that final decision to go. Because I think a lot of times there's more reasons to stay. All right, so now let's take a look at some of the reasons that maybe you should go. Because as confident as we are about the reasons that you should stay, I think that you can be equally confident about reasons to go. And I think that as you start to make this decision, this is a progression. It doesn't necessarily start with confidence, but as you begin to weigh it out and consider your options, I think that you can gain a lot of confidence. And I would encourage you, if you're in the middle of making this decision, not to make the final decision until you have full confidence about it. If you're not confident, you're probably making the wrong decision. So, okay, I'm gonna start with this one because this one's kind of near and dear to my heart, and I have had to make the decision to leave several different places for various reasons, but I would say that 75 to 85% of my reasons have always been for this. And I think this is a truly powerful reason that cannot be overlooked. And I would say a reason to go would be because of your family. Okay, now that could mean a lot of different things to a lot of different people. But most of the decisions that I have had to make to leave, at least in the recent decade, have been because of my family. Okay, and I will preface it by saying that I am a firm believer in this. You have to do what is best for your family. You have to always put your family first because this is a job. And yes, it's emotional, and yes, there are people involved, and yes, you have friends, and the kids depend on you, and there's a lot of factors, but you have to put your personal family first, whatever that means. And so I guess we'll do a little bit of a life check here. And it is that since season 4 has begun, I am actually in a new job, in a new position, doing a new thing. Season 3 was very interesting because between season 3 and between season 4, I've actually moved 3 different times. And this is my second job in that 6 months. And so the reason for that is kind of an interesting story that I'm going to share, because I think a lot of people would go like, this guy's a total flake. He just jumps from job to job.
I honestly, I think he's running from the law. I'm not sure. I think I don't know. I don't know.
He's a rambling man.
I just think so. Anyway, go
Right.
ahead.
Yeah. No, I'm not running from anything. But I will say that I was in a situation in my previous district that I loved. I absolutely, everything we just described about all the reasons to stay, I had all of those things in one place. It was a fantastic culture. I had great relationships. I was in the middle of projects. There was tons of continuity. My vision was aligned. There was not any reason at all for me to leave. I had just been moved and promoted into an administrative position. I was the digital learning coordinator for the entire district. I absolutely loved what I did, and but I had to leave, and so I want to kind of be able to share that. So what had happened was I became the coordinator of digital learning for my district in 2020. So of all the years to become the coordinator of digital learning, whenever the whole world shut down and everybody went to digital learning. And the interesting thing about that was my district did not have any digital learning program prior to me being in that position. It was a brand new position that was created, and I was the first person to hold that position. And it was a great honor. I was totally excited to do it, and things were going really well. And so the quarantine hit, and I became the busiest I think I've ever been. I was literally working 7 days a week and probably a good, 16 hours a day for a good month or so. And, that was okay. It didn't bother me. I knew that we had to get the job done, and things were moving along. And I mean, it wasn't just me working there. We had a huge teaching and learning department that we were basically around the clock trying to make our district function. And we did a phenomenal job. And I can't begin to say what a great team that we had doing that. And, but the interesting thing was that I was at home working, and it was trying to remember, I think it was late April, and I was at home working, and at the time, the home I was living in, basically, I had an upstairs, but the only thing upstairs was like my home office. So it's kind of like it's kind of like a finished attic, and it was just like this gigantic room, and it was my office, and so that's where I worked, and so it was a really good situation for me to be able to work remotely. And just to give you a little backstory, like, I lived in a suburb, okay, and a suburb of a really large city. And we actually owned like 7 acres of property, and it was a shared property with me and some of my other family members. My parents owned part of the property. My aunt and uncle owned part of the property. And that's, in Texas, that's not a totally uncommon thing. There's a lot of folks that do like the whole family commune type idea. And so, we were doing that, and we enjoyed it. We had lived there. My family had owned that property for over 30 years. And so, my wife and my daughters, we lived there, and, everything was great, and it was gated. It was like a gated community, but it was our gated community. I mean, there's no one in, no one out kind of thing. And so we had seen for the past, 5-10 years that, things were changing in the area, and definitely, the demographics were shifting. And I don't even necessarily mean, as far as racial, but just like income level, and just a lot of things were changing, and the things around the area, we were starting to feel the area kind of deteriorate in a way as far as safety went. but we didn't think too much of it because we lived there, and it's where we invested our lives. We invested our money there, and that was it. And we felt really safe. We were in a gated area, and we had no problems. And in the middle of quarantine, I was working one day, and I was actually on a phone call, and my wife and my 3 daughters were at home, and I was upstairs and they were downstairs and just doing what they do, and my daughters are young. I have a 6-year-old, currently a 3-year-old, and a 14-month-old. And so they were young, and they still are. And all of a sudden I hear like a lot of commotion downstairs, which is not a strange thing. There's always a lot of commotion in my house because my kids, and I didn't think too much of it. And then I'm like, it sounded like someone was banging on the walls. And I'm going like, what are my children doing? But I'm on a phone call, so I'm trying to maintain my professional composure. And I'm like, what are they doing down there? And all of a sudden I hear my wife. And my wife has a tone in her voice that I've never heard before. And she screams my name. And she's like, you need to get down here. And so I opened the door, and like right outside the door, there's like an L-shaped staircase. So when I open the door, I can't see downstairs. All I can see is the stairs. And so I walk down the stairs to look, and I see my wife, and she's panicked. And she's like, someone's breaking into our house. And in that moment, it was like my whole world started to spin, because it's so surreal. Like, no one can break into your house. Like, what does that mean? I live in a gated community. Like, I say community, I mean, our property, our 7 acres is gated. Like, you can't get in. Like, what are you talking about? Someone's breaking into our house. Like, it's like my brain wasn't functioning. I'm like, what are you talking about? So I immediately ran down the stairs. And as I went down the stairs, I turned into our a room that was kind of on the side of our house. And I look out our back patio, and there's a man. And as I look, our entire back patio door is shattered in. And there is a man standing on my back porch, breaking in the window to my house. And I just didn't even know how to respond. And
what time of day was it?
This was
what
like
time?
3 p.m. in the afternoon.
Mm-hmm.
So this wasn't like midnight, 11 o'clock. I mean, like, it was the middle of the day. And so literally my heart sinks, and it's like you don't know what to do in that moment. And so we had this giant rolling table, because the room was actually, we do homeschool. And my wife had this giant rolling, we call it the school table. And it's just this big, 6-foot long table on wheels that she does the kids' lessons at. So I take that table and I roll it and I shove it in front of the door to barricade the door. And then at this time, the guy had put down, we had this old, heavy, work lamp on our back porch. And it had a really heavy bottom. And he had picked that up, and that's what he was banging in our back door with. And so he had put that down, and he had walked off of our porch, and he was walking to the back side of our house. So I ran, after I barricaded the door, I told my wife and kids, to get in the back room, to lock themselves in there. And then I immediately got the phone and called my aunt and uncle, who lived next door. Thankfully, they were home. And they were the only people home at the time. And so my aunt is a retired police officer, and my uncle was a retired firefighter. And so they know how to deal with crisis situations, thankfully, because I surely did not at that moment. And so I told them, they run outside, and basically they cornered the guy and held him there until the police could get there. Now, mind you, it took the police almost 40 minutes to get to my house. So literally, they were detaining him, if you will. Come to find out, the guy definitely had some mental illness. And by the grace of God, he did not come into my house, because I don't think he even realized he had broken in our back door. He wasn't with it enough to realize that. And, thankfully, and I do believe that God just protected us in all that, and nobody was hurt, nobody was injured, and there was minimal property damage, thankfully. But after the guy was arrested, as he fought the cops to get into the cop car, and it took 2 large cops to manhandle him and get him into the car. And as they were leaving, the world just kind of stops and you just kind of take it all in. And then I realized that if anything had been different that day, my entire world would have been destroyed. Normally on a normal day, I would have been at work. I wouldn't have been at home. And I don't know how my wife and kids would have handled that. I'm not saying they couldn't have, but I don't know what they would have done. What actually happened very serendipitously was the reason my wife knew that the guy was trying to break into our house, because she was actually in the back room tending to our infant. And my 3-year-old ran back there and said, Mom, there's a bad guy outside with a hammer. Now, it wasn't a hammer. It was a giant, work lamp, but she didn't know. And my wife knew, to believe her that something was wrong. Our back door and our front door are always unlocked. We don't think to lock it. It's not a thing. And so actually my wife had ran in before she called for me, and she instinctively just locked the back door because she knew something was wrong. And within 30 seconds of her locking that, he was banging it in. And if she hadn't have done that, he would have walked right in. And I don't know what my life would look like. We later realized after talking to our kids that they had seen him in our yard through the window, and we feel like he had seen them, and that was part of why he was trying to get into the house. So, there were so many things at play there. The other really emotional part of that was that normally we let our kids go outside in the front yard and, play and ride their bikes and do whatever. And, we were doing things in the house. My wife's washing dishes and whatever, and we don't think much to that. And if my kids had been outside like they normally were, he could have taken them, Another thing that was crazy about that day was my wife was scheduled to have a dentist appointment that day, and the kids were going to stay with me. And so I would have been upstairs and the kids would have been downstairs by themselves with the doors unlocked, But my wife woke up that morning and said, you know what, I feel like I should just cancel my dentist appointment. I'm not going to go today. And it's just like all these things had happened. And so we just felt so blessed that we were truly protected and all that. But it was after that night that we started to realize we can't stay here anymore. The next few weeks were really hard for me and my wife. Thankfully, my kids were not traumatized at all. But my wife and I, it was really tough for us because every noise we heard, we felt like someone was coming into our house, and you just feel really violated. And so we just realized it's time for our family to move. It's time for a change. We can't be here anymore. And I remember that was probably the hardest phone call I ever had to make, was to call my supervisor and say, look, I have to tell you what happened, and I have to tell you what I'm going to do as a result. And it was very hard, but I knew that's what was best for my family. And, since then we've been on a wild ride. In the past 6 months, we've moved 3 times trying to kind of find where we need to be. And, not to make a long story longer, but it is interesting enough. We decided to move to the coast of Texas, and our family sold out everything we had, and we were going to reinvest in a new place. And, so we get down there, and I thankfully found a really great job. And as you all know, I went back to band directing. That was in season 3, and found a really good job down there and felt really excited about that. And we were going to buy some land down there, and then some crazy things happened. We moved down there, and we realized that where we were living, all the water was contaminated, like to the point where it was causing lesions on our skin, and like our clothes were being stained, and all this weird stuff was happening. And so we started to investigate, and we realized that where we were, there was a giant plastics company, and they were literally causing damage to the ecosystem, and the water was corrupted. And so then we realized we can't live here either. And so, long story short, we ended up deciding not to buy that property, and we found new property somewhere far from there. And now we've bought that in, and things are better, and that's cool. And so now I've found an opportunity at a job near there. And so I'm back into the world of digital coaching and technology, and I'm in a great new district that I'm super excited about. And I'm really thankful to my old district because they understood my situation. They released me from my contract and allowed me to do this move. And so now I'm a digital learning coach again, and I'm in a new place, and things are great and things are settling down, and it's been a wild ride. But I say all that, and I say all those stories to just kind of give you an example of, I was in a great position, but I had to make some changes because it was absolutely what was best for my family. And so, I know you guys don't necessarily have families yet, but once you do, you realize the decision is not just what's best for your career. You have to consider all those other things. And I think we have a lot of listeners, who maybe you are single and you're like, well, that doesn't really apply to me. I kind of do what I do. But then we have a lot of listeners who you're like, you know what? Like, I have a family, and sometimes what's best for my career is not best for my kids or best for my husband or my wife or whatever the case may be. So I think family is a major consideration. So I hope that story wasn't too long, but I just wanted to give you a little update of where I am. Thank you. Go Mosley.
Yeah. Well, I mean,
that's a hard act to follow.
I mean, yeah, I think with that 2-hour story, I mean, yeah, and I know you told it just kind of understands like the severity of everything.
Yeah.
But, and you kind of covered the family and the promotion and all that.
Yeah. Yeah, because I do think that's another reason that's worthy of considering to go is a promotion. I mean, maybe you have an opportunity to move from a teacher to administrator or a higher position or whatever. I mean, these are all decisions that they're hard decisions, and maybe everything is in place, but that is what's best for you and or your family. And if that's the case, I think you have to take advantage of those things.
Mm-hmm. And like I left teaching with you the last time to go get my master's and go full time.
Exactly.
Which would help me, in my career, where I wanted to be. So
yeah,
that was a decision for me. It was a hard decision, but I knew I wouldn't be where I am now if I didn't make that decision there.
Exactly.
So.
Exactly.
Mm-hmm. Okay. I would just like to say, because you said now for a few times, if you wanted to leave, if you were like in the classroom and you want to be administrator or whatever, I'd just like to say that like you don't have to go that direction.
Right.
Like you could be an administrator and then want to go and be back in the classroom.
Absolutely.
Like I personally think I hate the stigma of that. Like if you want to move up in the educational career, that means you have to leave the classroom and then go and be an administrator. Absolutely not. Yeah. I think that sometimes that there are some administrators who thought like, hey, this is what I want to do. And they realize like working with adults sucks. like I don't want to do this. I'd rather be with children. Like, and then also like think about that for a second. Like if it's really that bad that you'd rather be with children than with adults, then maybe there's something else going on too. I don't know.
Yeah.
But don't just think that that ladder goes one way, because it doesn't necessarily go. Like there's nothing wrong with being an administrator and then wanting to go back into the classroom. Like we need people who want to be in the classroom.
And Tyler, you're so right, because there are folks who they're phenomenal teachers. They're just like masters of their craft. And then they're like, you know what? I need a change. I need to move into administration. And they get there and they go, you know what? My place is in the classroom. Like I need to be with those kids. And for no other reason than that's just what they love. And if you're in that position, then that's a reason to change, because you have to be where you have joy and where it makes you happy. And Tyler's exactly right. Moving into administration is not necessarily a promotion, quote unquote. I mean, you might make more money, but most people in administration would tell you it's not a promotion, it's a demotion. Because of the stress that it carries. And so yeah, we can't look at it as a one-way street that like this is the progression. You start as a teacher and then you become a curriculum specialist and then you become a whatever. I mean, it doesn't have to look that way. So it's about being where you need to be.
Yeah, and
Hmm.
I don't want to get too much on it because there's other things we want to talk about. But just so that because if it is that way, if that is how it's set up, then that means that there's always never going to be good teachers. That
Yeah.
means that like, oh, I was a teacher for X amount of time. I feel like I've reached what I needed to go, and now it's time to move on to the next level and be an administrator. And in education doesn't work like that.
Yeah.
Like sometimes like it's like I'm a teacher and I've worked really, really hard, and now I'm a master teacher.
Yeah.
And that's master teacher. That's trademarked by Teach Barrier. Just so you know,
No,
you
it's
can become a
not. People
master
say that
teacher.
all the
It
time.
is. It is definitely not. Yeah.
Okay, so I feel like we've also covered the culture and relationships because
Yeah.
basically everything we kind of talked about earlier. If you don't have that stuff,
Yeah.
and it's really something that kind of like builds up. It's kind of like a zit, like it just gets bigger and bigger and bigger until it pops, and then it's gross, and you don't like it, and then they don't like it, and then you're just like, okay, I gotta leave. I can't stay at this party anymore.
Yeah.
You know?
I
Um,
agree. I think that for the same reasons you might stay for culture and relationships, that can be flipped, and that might be the very reason you leave
Yeah.
mhm,
because
mhm,
it's not
mhm.
the right culture and there aren't good relationships.
Yeah. Here's also what I was thinking about. I think if you have to evaluate like what you feel like your potential is and what it is that you can do. You know how you go to an interview and they say, what do you think you can offer here?
Yeah.
Everything. I think I can do
Whatever.
everything.
If you're at a place where you feel like the culture, the environment, either admin, say budget, or like like everything in this school or the district is not allowing you to be the best teacher that you can for kids, then that's a reason that you might have to leave.
Mhm.
Because I can think of a place
Mm-hmm.
where I don't think like how long I stayed there, I would not be able to do what I can do my full potential because of the rock that was on top of me and I couldn't grow. You
Yeah.
know, it was not being able to be fed either professionally or by the culture or whatever. So
Yeah.
I think and this is not about being, cocky or anything like that. Like I think I can do better. If you feel like, man, I could do so much more if da da da, then I think that might be a reason. And like we said, the grass is green on the other side, but you have to be realistic and say, you know what, like, these are some small things that could happen that I know that it would help me help kids better. That's when you might have to think about it. Because I remember that's why I was like, you know what, I'll never be able to do what I think I can truly do here because of these circumstances here
Mm-hmm.
at this specific location.
Yeah, I remember, the first time I worked with Mosley and I ended up leaving that district. That was the main reason I left that district because I felt that that district didn't align with my philosophy of education. And I felt restricted in what I had the freedom to do to be able to teach the kids. And I knew it wasn't going to change because the system was bigger than me.
And then we went to a district that we had the freedom and no resources.
Exactly. And so
You
that was
know?
so weird because then the next place we went, we had all the freedom we wanted, but
And no
but
one
we
told us
had
what to
no and no one told us what to do. And not that we were just looking to not be told what to do. That wasn't the point.
Right.
But in
Yeah,
other
yeah.
words, they trusted us. And we did some phenomenal things there and we did things that no one else was doing. And they were great, but at the end of the day, no matter what we did, we were still so under supported monetarily and financially that we couldn't make it happen. And so then we had to find another place because although the vision may have aligned as far as, freedom and creativity and things, but it wasn't supported with finances. And so I mean, there's so many factors that you have to consider. So I think maybe the last thing we could consider today and a reason that maybe you would go, it kind of goes with what we're talking about. It might just be for personal growth. Sometimes you really
That's why I left.
do. Yeah. Sometimes you do need a new challenge. Sometimes you do need a new place to kind of blossom and grow. Or sometimes you need to move into a totally different field like Tyler did. And that is what kind of gives you your energy back.
Yeah, and I can definitely say that I feel like I have grown more this year because I changed subjects and it was just so everything I did was so different. Anything's gonna be different than band,
Right.
but things were so different. And one of my actual education goals that I have, and not a lot of people know this, is that I want to teach every subject at least once. And actually, my selfish goal is that I want to make everything good. Like I want to be known as the guy that went around. I was the math teacher and I made math good. And then I went around, became the volleyball coach and I made volleyball good. And then I went
Wow.
around, I became the culinary teacher and I made culinary good. You know, I want to be known as the dude who went around, taught everything and made it good. You know, but another thing is so like I'm pretty young. I'm the youngest one here by at least 40 years.
Wow.
28.
Good one.
And anyway, I don't plan, like it's just unrealistic for me to think that I'm going to be at my school district for the rest of my life. Like that's just, I mean, it could happen. I'm not going to say it's not a possibility, but it's probably an unrealistic possibility.
But let me say this: that is something because, whenever I worked with you in that district, there was a teacher in that district who I love to death. She's phenomenal, and she went to school there. Like she graduated from that high
Oh,
school,
yeah, yeah.
and it was her first job, and she has been there, and she's never worked anywhere else, and she's getting ready to retire. And that is noble to stay in a place that long because you become a pillar of everything that has happened there. So, I mean, like if you're in that situation, then more power to you. Like that is commendable. But I think Tyler has a point. Nowadays, especially like the way that people are wired and the way things are and the culture and millennials and, all these other things that we could
Look,
say, that's not how people think
that's true.
anymore. And some people do, but it's very rare. And I think that whenever you find people like that, you need to give them a big hug and like applaud their service because they have literally given to that community their whole lives.
That's true. Look, and I'll be the first to say, like, I'm a millennial and we're terrible. Like, we're just
Well, I'm
terrible.
glad you said it.
But I have a lot of friends who were working in some districts for about, I'd say about 3, maybe 4 years. And they either got married, so I guess it goes to the family thing, or they were just ready to move and go somewhere else. They didn't want to be stuck to the same school district forever. They wanted more than one school district on their resume in case something ever happened. And they just wanted to expose themselves to different cultures, different experiences, different kids, different demographics, they just wanted to expose themselves to different stuff. And so they've picked up and they've left quite a few times just because they were looking for something different. And if that's what you're doing, that's what you're trying to accomplish and get some personal growth or whatever, then like I say, go for it, and it's good. And I'll also say, do it while you have, because this is what I was told when I graduated, is that if you want to move around to a lot of school districts, do it early on in your career because it's easier to get a job when you have less experience sometimes than if you have worked 35 plus years and you go and try to get a job somewhere else. And they told me that because of something with the pay or whatever. I don't know. Maybe that's not right. Maybe that's whatever.
Yeah, I
So,
see what you're saying. Because in other words, like if you go to another place, like they're gonna have to pay you more. From an administrative standpoint, I don't know that that's always the case because I think administrators are oftentimes looking for folks who have a lot of experience because they know what they're gonna get out of them. So I mean, I think you could see it both of those ways because but nowadays I think there are fewer and fewer school districts that are going like, well, I don't want to have to pay them extra. I'd rather just hire a first year teacher. I mean, there might be some issues like that, but I would say it's a pretty equal playing ground when it comes to hiring.
well, and you know what? I mean, that's something that one of my college professors told me, and just about everything they told me about education when I was in education school was wrong. So,
Well, there you go. So,
so
but yeah. So I think, man, today has been a heavy hitter. Like I think these are some things that we can really think about because there are reasons you need to stay, and then there are reasons that maybe you shouldn't. And so, hopefully this is helping you. And if you're not really considering moving right now, then I would say don't. I mean, that's cool, but keep this episode in your back pocket because more than likely there's going to come a time when you're going to consider this. And
You'll know when the time comes.
you'll know. And so hopefully today you feel a little more at ease about this decision. Like I said, I definitely think if you don't feel confident, then you shouldn't make the move. Because if you have doubt or if you're hesitant, I think that opens the door for a lot of struggles and frustrations along the way. And then the last thing I would say is seek wise counsel. I think that if you are thinking about making a change, whether that be, a new campus, a new district, just a new subject, whatever, talk to someone in authority over you, if you will. Like maybe have that conversation with your principal or a department head or an assistant principal or someone to get a different perspective, and make sure you're not making that emotional decision and talk it out. And the last thing I would say is this: if you are considering that move and once you do make that decision, you need to, I highly encourage you to let your administrator know as soon as you've made that decision, because you don't want to catch them off guard, because they have the very arduous task of finding your replacement. And whether, they want to see you gone or whether they don't, it's still hard to find a replacement, and they need to have time to do that. And if you're undecided, but you're leaning toward it, I think you should start those conversations, because trust me, principals would rather know that you're considering it so that they can be prepared than, come May 31st, you're like, later suckers, that doesn't sit well. And recommendations are a real thing. They're a real thing. And you don't want a reason for someone to give you a bad recommendation, because they really do check references and they really do want to know. And this is the question they always ask: would you rehire this person? So you want that supervisor to be able to say, you know what, we're sad to see them go, but we understand that this is something they've got to do, and I would rehire them in a moment. That's the kind of thing you want spoken of you, not, well, they didn't even tell me till last week, so absolutely not, that kind of thing. And so I encourage you to really seek this out. Don't make a quick decision. Don't let your emotions control you, but definitely think through it and weigh out those pros and cons. But in the end of the day, I think there's good reasons to stay and there are good reasons to go. And we wish you the best, and we hope that you make those great decisions. So if this episode's helped you or you have some questions, we'd love to hear from you. You can engage with us. You can email us at info@teachbigger.com. You can also send us a message on Twitter or Instagram. We're at teachbigger. We'd love to hear from you. We heard from a listener this week just saying how much that the podcast is helping them, and that was such an encouragement to us just to hear the things going on. So we would love to hear from you. Hope that you enjoyed today's episode. I hope that this helps you in making your decisions. Don't worry about Black Friday, okay? It's going to be okay. And if you're told that you're not being renewed, that's okay. The decision's been made for you. So now pick up and move on and do your best. No, just kidding. Oh, anyways, maybe we should cut that. So, anyways, but we hope that you have a great week. Spring break's coming up, so hang in there. And like we said, shout out to us. We'd love to hear from you. And anything else, guys?
Hashtag I teach bigger.
Teach bigger.
That's it. All right. Well, have a great week, and we'll see you back next week.